The jewel box slipped from Katherine Jane's trembling fingers and shattered against the wooden boardwalk, sending precious stones scattering like drops of captured starlight across the dusty planks of Alta, Utah's autumn fair. She dropped to her knees immediately, her green traveling dress pooling around her as she scrambled to recover the emeralds and sapphires that represented her uncle's entire week of labor. The year was 1883, and the mountain town bustled with ranchers, miners, and merchants who had traveled from across the territory for this annual celebration of harvest and commerce. "Let me help you, miss." The voice came from above her, deep and steady as mountain stone. Katherine looked up to find a man crouching beside her, his sun-bronzed hands already gathering the scattered gems with surprising gentleness. He wore dusty leather chaps over worn denim, a faded blue shirt, and a hat that had seen better days. His eyes, however, were what caught her attention, clear and gray as morning mist over the Wasatch Peaks. "Thank you," she managed, her heart still racing from the panic of nearly losing her uncle's inventory. "I am so clumsy sometimes. Uncle Harold will be furious if even one stone is missing." The cowboy smiled, revealing straight white teeth in his tanned face. "Well then, we best make sure we find them all. I am Luke Kane, by the way. Most folks just call me Luke, Katherine Jane, Katie to most people." She accepted another recovered emerald from his calloused palm, their fingers brushing briefly. The contact sent an unexpected warmth through her despite the cool October air. Together they worked in companionable silence, checking between the boards and under the nearby stalls until the last tiny ruby was safely recovered. Katie counted them twice, relief flooding through her when the tally matched perfectly. "Thank you so much, Mr. Kane. You have saved me from a terrible scolding. Just Luke, please." He stood and offered his hand to help her up. She took it, surprised by the strength in his grip and the care with which he steadied her. "Are you here with your family, my uncle, Harold Jacobson?" "He is a jeweler from Salt Lake City, but we travel to the smaller towns and fairs to sell directly. He says people appreciate seeing the craftsman behind the work." She brushed dust from her skirt, acutely aware that her appearance must be rather disheveled. "And you, are you from Alta?" Luke shook his head. "I work the Triple Bar Ranch about 10 miles south. We drove cattle up yesterday for the livestock show. Not much call for a cowboy at a fair otherwise, but I figured I would look around." His gray eyes held a hint of amusement. "Glad I did." A flush crept up Katie's cheeks at the implication in his words. Before she could respond, her uncle's sharp voice cut through the crowd noise. "Katherine, where have you been? We have customers waiting." "I must go," she said quickly, clutching the jewel box to her chest. "Thank you again, Luke." "Wait," he called as she turned away. "Will you be here tomorrow? The fair runs through Sunday, does it not?" She glanced back over her shoulder, unable to suppress a smile. "Yes, we will be at the same booth all 3 days. Then I hope to see you again, Katie Jane." The way he said her name, soft and deliberate, made her pulse quicken. Katie hurried back to her uncle's booth, where the older man was showing a portly woman an intricate silver necklace set with turquoise. Harold Jacobson was a meticulous man in his late 50s, with wire-rimmed spectacles and fingers that never quite lost their jeweler's tremor. He had taken Katie in after her parents died of influenza 5 years ago, teaching her the trade and treating her more like an apprentice than a dependent niece. "There you are," he said without looking up from his sales pitch. "Mrs. Henderson is interested in this piece. Please show her the matching earrings." Katie quickly stowed the recovered jewel box beneath the counter and retrieved the earrings from their velvet-lined case. As she displayed them for the customer, her mind wandered to gray eyes and a gentle smile. She shook her head slightly, trying to focus. She had not come to Utah to moon over cowboys, no matter how kind or handsome they might be. The afternoon passed in a blur of customers and sales. Alta's fair attracted people from throughout the territory, and her uncle's reputation for quality craftsmanship meant steady business. Katie wrapped purchases, calculated prices, and made change from the cash box, all while answering questions about the various pieces on display. Her uncle had taught her well, and she could speak knowledgeably about the properties of different gemstones, the techniques used in their settings, and the care required to maintain fine jewelry. As the sun began its descent behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, the crowd thinned. Uncle Harold counted the day's receipts with satisfaction. "A good start," he announced. "At this rate, we will clear enough profit to expand the workshop back home." "That is wonderful, Uncle." Katie began carefully packing away the remaining inventory, each piece nestled in its designated spot in the traveling cases they used for transport. "You did well today, my dear. Your mother would be proud of how you have learned the trade." Harold's voice softened. He rarely spoke of Katie's mother, his younger sister, but when he did, the grief was still evident even after 5 years. "Thank you, Uncle. I had a good teacher." She smiled at him fondly. For all his gruffness and exacting standards, Harold had given her purpose after her loss. The precision required in jewelry work, the focus and attention to detail, had helped her through the darkest days of mourning. They secured the booth for the night, and made their way to the boarding house where they had taken rooms for the weekend. Alta was smaller than Salt Lake City, nestled in the mountains where silver and lead mines had brought prosperity to the region. The town had a rough edge that the fair temporarily softened, but Katie could see the harder realities beneath the festive decorations. This was mining and ranching country, where people worked with their hands and lived close to the bone. That evening, Katie stood at her window looking out over the town. Lanterns were being lit along the main street, and she could hear music drifting from one of the saloons. Somewhere out there, Luke Kane was probably settling in for the night, perhaps at a camp with the other ranch hands who had come for the livestock show. She wondered if he was thinking of her the way she found herself thinking of him. "Foolish," she whispered to herself. "You have known him for all of 30 minutes." But the warmth of his hand helping her to her feet lingered in her memory like a promise. The next morning dawned clear and cool, with frost glittering on the grass like scattered diamonds. Katie dressed carefully, choosing her blue calico dress because it brought out the color of her eyes, then immediately felt silly for the calculation. She was not the sort of girl who primped for men. At 22, she had received her share of attention from young men in Salt Lake City, but none had stirred more than polite interest. Her uncle's apprentices sometimes tried to flirt, but she kept those interactions strictly professional. The jewelry business was her life, her purpose. Or it had been, until a gray-eyed cowboy had helped her gather scattered gems on a dusty boardwalk. The fair's second day brought even larger crowds. Farmers and their families came in from distant homesteads. Miners from the surrounding mountains took their one day off, and merchants did brisk business in everything from farm equipment to fancy hats. Katie's uncle was in excellent spirits as sales exceeded the previous day's totals. Around midday, during a brief lull, Katie saw Luke approaching the booth. He had cleaned up since yesterday, his shirt pressed and his dark hair still damp from washing. He carried his hat in his hands, and there was something almost nervous in the way he walked. "Good afternoon, Katie." His smile was warm but uncertain. "I hope I am not interrupting your work." "Not at all. We are between customers at the moment." She was acutely aware of her uncle's interested gaze. "Uncle Harold, this is Luke Kane. He helped me yesterday when I dropped the jewel box." Ah, the clumsy incident you mentioned. Harold extended his hand over the counter. Thank you for your assistance, young man. Those stones represent considerable value. My pleasure, sir. Luke shook hands firmly. I wonder if I might speak with your niece for a few minutes. There is a fellow at the livestock pavilion selling the finest quarter horses I have ever seen, and I thought Katie might enjoy looking at them. Katie's breath caught. It was a bold request, asking to take her away from the booth during fair hours. She waited for her uncle's refusal. But Harold surprised her. I suppose I can manage alone for a short while. The lunch hour is typically slow anyway. He fixed Luke with a stern look. You will behave as a gentleman, on my honor, sir. Very well. Katie be back within the hour. She could hardly believe it as Luke offered his arm and she took it, letting him guide her away from the booth and into the crowded fairground. They walked in silence for a moment, navigating between families and merchants. I hope I did not overstep, Luke said quietly. But I found myself thinking about you all night and I wanted to see you again. If you would rather return to your uncle's booth, I understand. Katie's heart fluttered. No, I am glad you came. I was hoping you would. His smile was like sunrise. Truly, truly. She squeezed his arm lightly. Though I should warn you, I know nothing about horses beyond which end bites. Luke laughed, a rich sound that made several passers-by smile. Then this will be educational. The front end bites, by the way. The back end kicks. The livestock pavilion was a large, open structure at the edge of the fairground, where ranchers displayed their finest animals. The smell of hay and livestock hung heavy in the air, mixed with leather and saddle soap. Cowboys and ranchers gathered around the stalls, discussing bloodlines and confirmation with the seriousness of men whose livelihoods depended on such things. Luke led her to a pen where a magnificent black horse stood, its coat gleaming like polished jet. The animal had intelligent eyes and moved with a grace that even Katie could appreciate. That is quality, Luke said with unmistakable admiration. Good bone structure, well muscled, and look at those legs, built for both speed and endurance. You sound like my uncle describing a fine gemstone. Katie smiled up at him. All this talk of structure and quality. I suppose every craftsman has his appreciation for excellence. Luke rested his arms on the fence rail. Your uncle creates beauty with stones and metal. Ranchers try to breed the best horses. Different materials, same goal. Katie had not thought of it that way before, but she found herself nodding. That makes sense. Though I must say, horses are considerably larger than anything I work with, and more likely to step on your toes. Luke's eyes crinkled with amusement. Do you enjoy the jewelry trade? I do, very much. There is something satisfying about taking raw materials and creating something beautiful, something that might be passed down through generations. She watched the black horse nuzzle its handler's hand, searching for treats. When I set a stone perfectly or help my uncle complete a particularly intricate piece, I feel like I am making something that matters. Does that sound silly? Not at all. Luke's expression had turned serious. It sounds like you have found your calling. Not everyone is that fortunate. What about you? Is ranching your calling? He was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. I grew up on ranches, worked cattle since I was tall enough to sit a horse. It is the only life I know. But sometimes I wonder if it is what I would choose or just what I fell into because it was familiar. There was something vulnerable in that admission that touched Katie deeply. She had assumed this confident cowboy knew exactly who he was and what he wanted, but apparently everyone carried their own uncertainties. Perhaps callings can change, she suggested. Or perhaps the same work can mean different things at different times in our lives. Luke turned to look at her, and the intensity in his gray eyes made her breath catch. You are quite wise for someone so young. How old are you, if you do not mind my asking? 22, and you? 25. 3 years on a ranch ages a man, though, he smiled. Between the sun and the dust and the ornery cattle, I probably look older. You look just fine, Katie said, then blushed at her own boldness. Do I? Luke's voice had dropped lower, more intimate despite the noise around them. Because I think you look more than fine, Katie Jane. I think you are the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. Her pulse hammered in her throat. You barely know me. Then let me get to know you. Have dinner with me tonight after the fair closes. There is a decent restaurant in town, nothing fancy, but the food is good. Katie knew she should refuse. She was here to work, not to be courted by a cowboy she had just met. But when she looked into Luke's eyes, she saw something that made her want to take the risk. I would need to ask my uncle's permission. I will ask him myself if you like, properly the way it should be done. Luke straightened, his posture shifting into something more formal. I may be just a ranch hand, but I know how to show respect. You are not just anything, Katie said firmly. And yes, I would like to have dinner with you. Let us go ask my uncle together. They walked back through the fair, and Katie found herself noticing details she had missed before. The way Luke nodded politely to everyone they passed, the care he took to guide her around muddy patches in the path, the respectful distance he maintained even as he clearly wanted to be closer. He was a gentleman, despite the rough exterior of his profession. Uncle Harold was helping a young couple select a wedding ring when they returned to the booth. He glanced up, noted Katie's flushed cheeks and bright eyes, and something knowing crossed his face. When the couple had made their purchase and left, he turned his full attention to Luke. Back already? That was not a full hour. No, sir. I wanted to speak with you before the afternoon gets too busy. Luke removed his hat again, holding it respectfully. I would like your permission to take Katie to dinner this evening after the fair closes. I promise to have her back to the boarding house at a respectable hour, and to behave with complete propriety. Harold studied Luke for a long moment, his jeweler's eye assessing the young man as carefully as he might examine a questionable stone. Katie held her breath. You work the Triple Bar Ranch? Yes, sir, for the past 3 years. Before that, I worked spreads in Colorado and Wyoming. So you move around frequently. Katie saw where this was going and felt her hopes deflate. Her uncle was going to refuse based on Luke's lack of stability. But Luke met the question head-on. I have in the past, sir, but I am looking to settle now, perhaps buy my own small spread eventually. A man gets tired of drifting. Indeed. Harold's expression softened slightly. Very well. You may take my niece to dinner. But understand, Mr. Kane, that Katie is very dear to me. She is not some saloon girl to be trifled with. I understand completely, sir. I would never treat her as anything less than the lady she is. See that you remember it. Harold's tone was stern but not unkind. Katie, help me with these displays. We have customers coming. The afternoon passed in a happy haze for Katie. She helped customers, wrapped purchases, and discussed gemstones, but her mind kept drifting to the evening ahead. She caught Luke watching from a distance several times, and each time their eyes met, she felt that same flutter of excitement. When the fair finally closed for the day, and the last customer had been served, Katie hurried back to the boarding house to change. She had brought only practical dresses for the trip, nothing suitable for courting, but she did her best with a gray dress that her uncle said brought out her eyes. She unpinned her hair, brushed it until it shone, then repinned it in a softer style that allowed a few tendrils to frame her face. You look lovely, my dear, Uncle Harold said when she emerged. He was sitting in the boarding house parlor reading a newspaper. But Katie, I must ask, are you certain about this young man? You have known him barely a day. Katie sat beside her uncle, taking his weathered hand in hers. I know it seems sudden, but Uncle, there is something about him. When I look at Luke, I feel like I have found something I did not even know I was searching for. That is how I felt when I met your aunt, God rest her soul. Harold's eyes grew misty. He had been a widower for nearly a decade, his wife taken by the same influenza epidemic that had claimed Katie's parents. But feelings can be deceiving, especially when they come on strong and fast. I know. I will be careful, I promise. But please do not ask me to close my heart before I have even given it a chance. Harold sighed. You are so like your mother, she had that same stubborn optimism. He squeezed her hand. Very well, but take things slowly, you have your whole life ahead of you. Luke arrived promptly at 6 o'clock, cleaned up and wearing his best clothes, which, while not fancy, were neat and well kept. He offered his arm to Katie, and they walked together through Alta's cooling evening streets. The restaurant he had chosen was small but clean, with checkered tablecloths and the smell of good cooking drifting from the kitchen. Over plates of roast beef and potatoes, they talked. Luke told her about growing up in Wyoming, the son of a ranch hand who had died when Luke was 15, leaving him to make his own way. He spoke of the places he had worked, the things he had seen, the dreams he carried of someday having his own land. Katie shared her own story, the comfortable childhood in Salt Lake City, the devastating loss of her parents, the way her uncle had given her purpose when she thought her world had ended. She described the satisfaction of working with precious stones, the mathematical precision required in cutting and setting, the way light could transform a simple rock into something transcendent. It is like you are capturing light and holding it still, Luke said, his food forgotten as he listened, making something permanent out of something that usually just passes by. That is exactly it. Katie felt a surge of warmth that he understood. Most people just see the finished product, the pretty jewelry. They do not think about the process, the intention behind each choice. I think about process all the time with ranching, Luke said. Every decision affects the next one. Which pasture to use when, which bulls to breed with which cows, when to move the herd. It is like a puzzle that never quite gets solved because the pieces keep changing. They talked until the restaurant owner politely suggested they might want to continue their conversation elsewhere as he needed to close. Luke apologized profusely, left a generous tip despite his limited means, and walked Katie back toward the boarding house. The night was clear and cold, stars brilliant overhead in a way they never were in the city. They walked slowly, neither wanting the evening to end. Katie, Luke said as they neared the boarding house, I know this is sudden, and I know you probably think I am crazy, but I have to tell you something. She stopped, turning to face him in the starlight. What is it? I have met a lot of people in my life. I have worked with cowboys from every state and territory, met ranchers and farmers and town folk, but I have never met anyone like you. He reached out hesitantly, and when she did not pull away, took her hand gently in his. You are smart and kind and beautiful, yes, but it is more than that. When I talk to you, I feel like I am talking to someone who really sees me, not just a ranch hand or a hired cowboy, but me. Luke Kane, the man who is trying to figure out who he wants to be. Katie's throat felt tight with emotion. I feel the same way. When I am with you, I am not just the jeweler's niece or the orphan girl. I am just Katie, and that feels like enough. It is more than enough, Luke said softly. Katie, I know you have to leave when the fair ends. I know you have a life in Salt Lake City, and I am just a cowboy from a ranch. But could we write to each other? Could we see if this thing between us is real? Yes, she said without hesitation. Yes, I would like that very much. Luke's smile was radiant even in the dim light. Then I am the luckiest man in Utah. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently, a gesture so sweet and old-fashioned that Katy felt tears prick her eyes. "I should go in," she whispered, though she did not move. "I know. Your uncle will be watching the clock." Luke released her hand reluctantly. "But tomorrow is the last day of the fair. May I see you again?" "Yes, come by the booth whenever you can. I will be there when it opens." He stepped back, putting proper distance between them. "Good night, Katherine Jane." "Good night, Luke." She forced herself to walk to the boarding-house door, knowing if she looked back she would run to him. Inside, she found her uncle waiting up, though he pretended to be absorbed in his newspaper. "Did you have a pleasant evening?" he asked neutrally. "Yes, uncle, very pleasant." Katy sat down, needing to share her feelings with someone. "He is a good man, kind and thoughtful and honest. Those are fine qualities." Harold set down his paper. "But Katy, what future is there with a ranch hand? You are building a life in the jewelry trade, you have prospects, security. This young man, as nice as he may be, cannot offer you those things." "I know," Katy said quietly. "But uncle, is security everything? You loved Aunt Margaret, did you not? Would you have given her up if someone had told you she was not practical?" Harold's expression softened. "No, I would not have. Your aunt was the light of my life, practical or not," he sighed. "But I do not want to see you hurt, my dear. Cowboys are notorious for their wandering ways. Luke said he wants to settle down, to buy his own land someday. Many men say such things. Following through is another matter." Harold stood and kissed her forehead. "But I can see your heart is already involved, so I will say only this. Be careful and trust your instincts. You are a smart girl. If something feels wrong, pay attention to that feeling." Katy hugged her uncle tightly. "Thank you for understanding, and for letting me make my own choices. You are not a child anymore, though you will always be my little Katy. Now off to bed with you. Tomorrow is our last day of sales." In her small room, Katy lay awake for a long time, replaying every moment of the evening. The way Luke had listened when she spoke, really listened, as if her words mattered. The gentleness in his touch when he took her hand. The vulnerability when he admitted his own uncertainties about his path in life. She had never felt this way before, this combination of excitement and terror, hope and uncertainty. Was this love, or just infatuation? How was anyone supposed to tell the difference? The third and final day of the fair dawned bright and beautiful, the kind of autumn day that made the mountains look like they had been painted against the sky. Katy dressed quickly, her stomach fluttering with anticipation. She would see Luke today, but then the fair would end, and she would return to Salt Lake City. The thought of leaving him behind felt physically painful. Uncle Harold was already at breakfast when she came down, looking tired but satisfied. "We have done well this weekend," he told her over eggs and toast. "Well enough that I am thinking of making Alta a regular stop on our traveling circuit." Katy's heart leaped. Truly, how often? Perhaps quarterly. There is clearly a market here, and the mine owners pay well for quality pieces to send back to their families in the East. Harold smiled knowingly. "Would that arrangement please you?" "Very much, uncle." Katy could not keep the joy from her voice. Seeing Luke every few months was better than never seeing him again. "I thought it might. Now eat your breakfast. We have a full day ahead." True to his word, Luke was waiting when they opened the booth. He helped Uncle Harold carry the heavy display cases from their locked storage, refusing to let the older man strain himself. Harold accepted the help with grudging approval, and Katy noticed her uncle watching Luke with a more assessing, less dismissive eye. The day was busy from the start. It seemed everyone wanted to make their purchases before the fair ended, and the booth had a constant stream of customers. Luke stayed nearby, helping when he could but mostly just watching Katy work. She found his presence comforting rather than distracting. and several times she caught herself explaining pieces to customers with more enthusiasm than usual, performing slightly for his benefit. During a brief afternoon lull, Luke approached the counter with something hidden in his hand. "I have something for you," he said quietly, glancing at Uncle Harold, who was arranging a display. "It is not much, but I wanted you to have it." He opened his palm to reveal a small piece of turquoise, roughly the size of a thumbnail. It was unpolished but beautiful, with rich blue color and interesting matrix patterns running through it. "I found it years ago when I was working a ranch in New Mexico. Something made me keep it, though I never knew why until now." Luke's eyes were soft as he placed it in her hand. "I want you to have it, Katie. Maybe your uncle could set it for you someday. When you look at it, you will remember me." Katie felt tears sting her eyes. The stone was not valuable in monetary terms, nothing compared to the gems in her uncle's cases. But the gesture, the meaning behind it, made it precious beyond measure. "Luke, this is beautiful, but are you certain you have kept it all these years?" "I kept it because I was waiting. I did not know what for, but now I do. I was waiting for you." He smiled, though she could see the sadness lurking behind it. They both knew she was leaving tomorrow. Before she could respond, a booming voice interrupted. "Kane, there you are. We have been looking all over for you." Katie looked up to see 3 cowboys approaching, all bearing the weathered look of men who lived hard outdoor lives. The one who had spoken was older, perhaps 40, with a graying beard and the bow-legged walk of someone who had spent more time on horses than on his feet. "Mr. Patterson," Luke said, straightening, "I did not expect to see you here today. Is something wrong?" "Wrong? No, nothing wrong. In fact, things are about to get very right." The man named Patterson clapped Luke on the shoulder. "We just sold the whole lot of cattle we brought, and at a damn good price. Excuse my language, miss," he added, tipping his hat to Katie. "The boss is so pleased he has given bonuses all around, and he is talking about expanding the operation." "That is wonderful news," Luke said, though Katie noticed he did not sound as excited as his employer seemed to expect. "More than wonderful. It means steady work, good pay, and opportunity for men who have proven themselves. Men like you, Kane." Patterson lowered his voice slightly, though Katie could still hear. "Between you and me, the boss is thinking of making you assistant foreman. It would mean more responsibility but also more money and a better bunkhouse. What do you say?" Katie saw the conflict flash across Luke's face. This was clearly an opportunity any ranch hand would value, a step toward the security and stability he had mentioned wanting. But she also saw him glance at her, and she understood the complication she represented. "That is very generous, Mr. Patterson. Can I have some time to think about it?" The older man looked surprised. "Think about it. Most cowboys would jump at this chance." "I know, sir, and I am grateful. I just need a day or two to consider all the implications." Patterson shrugged. "Fair enough. You have until we head back to the ranch tomorrow evening. Let me know then." He tipped his hat again to Katie and walked off with the other cowboys, leaving Luke looking troubled. "That sounded like good news," Katie said carefully. "Why do you not seem happy about it?" Luke ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as his habit when agitated. "It is good news. It is exactly the kind of opportunity I should want. But Katie, if I take that promotion, it will mean more time committed to the triple bar. More responsibilities that will make it harder to leave, to pursue my own dreams of having land." "But it also means security and better pay," Katie pointed out, though her heart was sinking. "Those are not small things." "No, they are not." Luke looked at her intensely. "But I realized something last night, lying awake thinking about you. I do not want security if it means being stuck in someone else's dream forever. I want to build something of my own, even if it means taking risks." Uncle Harold, who had been quietly arranging jewelry but clearly listening, spoke up. "Young man, might I offer some perspective?" Luke turned respectfully. "Of course, sir. I worked for another jeweler for 15 years before I opened my own shop. Those years were not wasted. I learned my craft, saved money, made connections. When I finally went independent, I was prepared." Harold fixed Luke with a stern but not unkind look. "Sometimes the path to our dreams requires patience and strategic thinking, not just bold leaps." "You are right, sir," Luke said slowly. "I know you are right. It is just that I met your niece, and suddenly I feel like time is running out, like if I do not act now, I will lose something precious." Katie's breath caught at his words. She wanted to tell him not to make life-changing decisions based on a 3-day acquaintance, but she also understood exactly what he meant. She felt it too, this urgency, this sense that something important was slipping away. "Luke," she said softly, "you should take the promotion. It is a good opportunity, and who knows where it might lead. We will write to each other like we planned. And Uncle Harold says we will return to Alta in 3 months. We can see each other then." 3 months, Luke repeated. "That feels like forever." "It will pass quickly," Katie said, trying to convince herself as much as him. "And in the meantime, you can be working toward your goals, saving money, learning from the foreman position, maybe even looking at land prices in the area." Luke's expression shifted, hope replacing some of the despair. "You are right. And 3 months is not so long, not really. People have waited longer for less." The rest of the afternoon flew by. As the fair began to wind down and vendors started packing up, Katie found herself fighting tears. She had known Luke for only 3 days, but the thought of saying goodbye felt unbearable. Uncle Harold, with uncharacteristic kindness, suggested Luke join them for dinner at the boarding house. "Nothing fancy," he said gruffly, "but it seems wrong to part without breaking bread together." Over a simple meal of stew and bread, the three of them talked about the fair, the sales they had made, the people they had met. It was carefully neutral conversation, avoiding the emotional minefield of Luke and Katie's impending separation. But Katie noticed her uncle studying Luke throughout the meal, and she could almost see him revising his assessment of the young cowboy. After dinner, Harold excused himself to do paperwork, leaving Luke and Katie in the parlor with the boarding house owner's wife as a distant chaperone. "I do not want to say goodbye," Katie admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then let us not think of it as goodbye, just a brief parting." Luke took her hand, not caring if anyone saw. "Katie, I meant what I said. You are precious to me, more precious than any gem in your uncle's cases. These 3 days have changed my life." Katie felt the tears she had been holding back start to fall. "You have changed mine too. I never believed in love at first sight, but Luke, when I look at you, I know this is real. I know it in my bones. Then we will make it work. I will write you every week. I will save every penny I can. And when you come back in 3 months, I will have a plan, a real plan for our future if you want one." "I want one," Katie said fiercely. "I want a future with you, Luke Kane. I do not care if it is crazy or impractical or too fast. I want it." Luke pulled her close, and Katie went willingly, resting her head against his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, strong and steady, and felt his arms around her like a promise. 3 months, he murmured into her hair. "I can do anything for 3 months if I know you are waiting at the end of it." "I will be waiting," Katie promised. "I will be counting the days." They stood like that for a long moment, neither wanting to be the first to let go. Finally, the boarding house owner's wife cleared her throat meaningfully, and they stepped apart. "I should go," Luke said reluctantly. "We are leaving at dawn tomorrow, and you will still be asleep. But Katie, I will write to you as soon as I get back to the ranch. Watch for my letter." "I will write back immediately," Katie promised. "And Luke, take the promotion, build your future, I will be here when you are ready." He kissed her hand one final time, his lips lingering on her skin. "You are more precious than any gem," he whispered, echoing his earlier words. Then he was gone, walking out into the night, and Katie was left standing alone in the parlor with tears streaming down her face. Uncle Harold emerged from his room, took one look at Katie's tear-stained face, and simply opened his arms. She went to him gratefully, sobbing into his shoulder like the child she no longer was. "There, there," he murmured, patting her back. "Love always hurts a little, my dear, but sometimes the hurting is worth it." "How will I bear 3 months?" Katie asked through her tears. "The same way I bore 10 years without your aunt, one day at a time, remembering what you have to look forward to." Harold pulled back, wiping her tears with his handkerchief. "And Katie, for what it is worth, I think young Mr. Kane is a good man. He reminds me of myself at that age. Full of dreams and determination." "You approve?" Katie could hardly believe it. "I think he has potential, and I think he truly cares for you. That is enough for now." Harold smiled. "Now off to bed. We have a long journey back to Salt Lake City tomorrow, and I need you sharp for the train ride." Sleep came hard that night, but Katie clutched the turquoise stone Luke had given her and eventually drifted off, dreaming of gray eyes and gentle hands. The return to Salt Lake City felt surreal. Katie went through the motions of settling back into the workshop, helping her uncle with orders, managing the books. But her heart was in Alta, wondering what Luke was doing, if he was thinking of her as constantly as she thought of him. His first letter arrived exactly 1 week after they had parted. Katie recognized his handwriting on the envelope, bold and slightly uneven, and her hands shook as she opened it. "Dear Katie, I hope this letter finds you well and settled back into your routine in Salt Lake City. I am writing from the Triple Bar Ranch, where I have just finished my first week as assistant foreman. I accepted the position as you encouraged me to do, though I confess every day feels longer knowing I will not see you for months yet. The work is challenging but good. I am learning about the business side of ranching, not just the day-to-day labor. Mr. Patterson is a tough but fair teacher, and I am grateful for the opportunity. I have also begun saving more seriously. My wages have increased with the promotion, and I am putting aside every spare penny toward the dream of my own land. But Katie, none of this would mean anything if I could not share it with you. I find myself noticing things I want to tell you about. The way the sunset looked over the mountains last night, turning everything gold and pink. The new colt that was born 3 days ago, all awkward legs and curiosity. The satisfaction of solving a problem with the fence line that had been plaguing us for weeks. I carry your memory like a talisman. When the work is hard and I am tired and wondering if I am on the right path, I think of you and feel renewed. You make me want to be a better man, Katie, not just for you, but for myself. You make me believe I can be more than just another drifting cowboy. I hope you will write back and tell me about your life in the city. I want to know everything. What you are working on in the shop, what you think about, what makes you smile. I want to know you in all the ways I could not in our brief 3 days together. Only 77 days until we meet again. I am counting each one. Yours. Luke. Katie read the letter 3 times, then carried it to her room and placed it in the empty jewelry box she had designated for his correspondence. She sat at her small desk and began her reply, pouring out everything she had felt since leaving Alta. Thus began their correspondence. Letters flew back and forth between Salt Lake City and the Triple Bar Ranch, sometimes crossing in the mail. Katie learned about Luke's daily life, the challenges of his new position, the characters among the ranch hands, and his slowly forming plans for the future. She shared her own world with him, the intricate work of jewelry making, the customers who came to the shop, the satisfaction of mastering a new technique. But more than just events, they shared thoughts and dreams, fears and hopes. Katie told Luke about losing her parents, the grief that still occasionally caught her off guard, and her gratitude for her uncle's care. Luke wrote about his father's death, the loneliness of his wandering years, and his growing conviction that Katie was the home he had been searching for all along. 6 weeks into their separation, Luke's letter contained news that made Katie's heart race. "Dear Katie, I have found it. The perfect piece of land. 20 acres about 5 miles from Alta, with a creek running through it and good grazing. The owner is an elderly man who wants to move closer to his daughter in Denver, and he is willing to sell at a price I can almost afford. I say almost because I am still short about $200. At my current savings rate, it will take another 8 months to accumulate that amount. But Katie, when I walked that land, I could see our future. I could picture a small house by the creek, a barn for horses, maybe a few head of cattle to start. I could see you in a garden and me coming home at the end of the day to you. Am I presuming too much? I know we have not spoken explicitly about marriage, but Katie, I cannot imagine my future without you in it. Please tell me you feel the same way. Tell me I am not building castles in the air. I miss you every day. Only 30 days until we meet again. I am already planning what I want to say to you when I see you, how I want to hold you and never let go. Forever yours." Luke. Katie's hands trembled as she lowered the letter. Marriage. He was talking about marriage, and the terrifying thing was that she wanted it too. She wanted it with an intensity that shocked her. At 22, she had assumed she would marry eventually, but there had never been any urgency to it. Now, the thought of marrying Luke, of building a life with him on that land he described, felt like the most natural thing in the world. She went immediately to find her uncle, who was working on a complicated setting for a large opal. "Uncle Harold, I need to talk to you about something important." He looked up, saw her expression, and set down his tools. "This is about young Mr. Kane, I assume. He has found land. He wants to buy it to start a ranch. And Uncle, I think he is going to propose when we return to Alta next month." "I see." Harold was quiet for a moment. "And what will your answer be?" "I want to say yes. Is that insane? I have only spent 3 days with him in person." "Your aunt and I knew each other for 2 weeks before I proposed," Harold said mildly. "Sometimes the heart knows before the head catches up." He paused. "But Katie, if you marry this young man and move to Alta, what happens to your work here, to the business we have built together?" Katie had been wrestling with this very question. "I have been thinking about that. Alta is growing and there is no quality jeweler there. What if I opened a satellite shop? I could handle repairs and custom orders, send the more complex work to you here. We would still be partners, just in 2 locations." Harold's eyebrows rose. "You have given this considerable thought." "I have had 6 weeks to think of little else. And the money. Opening a shop requires capital, even a small one. Your young man is saving to buy land. Can he support a wife and help you establish a business? I have some money of my own from my parents' estate. You have been managing it for me." Katie straightened. "I could use that for the shop, and if Luke is short on his land purchase, I could help with that too." Harold sighed. "You are prepared to invest everything in this man and this dream?" "Yes. Is that foolish?" "No," Harold said slowly. "It is brave, and it is what your mother would have done. She always led with her heart." He stood and took Katie's hands. "If you are certain about this, then you have my blessing. But Katie, make sure you are doing this for the right reasons. Not just because you are in love, but because this is the life you truly want." "It is," Katie said with conviction. "I love the jewelry work and I want to continue it, but I also want Luke. I want the life we could build together. I do not want to choose between them if I do not have to. Then you shall not have to choose. Harold smiled. Now, write your young man back and tell him not to worry about that $200. Consider it an early wedding present from a sentimental old uncle. Katie threw her arms around Harold, nearly knocking over his work table. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Yes, yes. Now let me work. These opals will not set themselves. Katie practically flew to her desk to write her reply, her heart soaring. She poured everything into the letter, her love for Luke, her dreams for their future, and the news about her uncle's gift. She sealed it with a kiss and rushed to the post office immediately. The final weeks before their reunion dragged interminably. Katie threw herself into work, helping her uncle complete several major commissions while also planning for her move to Alta. She researched what equipment she would need for a small jewelry shop, made lists of supplies, and began designing pieces that would appeal to the Alta market. Luke's letters grew increasingly excited as he made arrangements to purchase the land. The owner had agreed to hold it for him until the end of November, giving Luke time to secure financing. With Harold's promised contribution, Luke now had enough to buy the land outright and still have some left over for building materials. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the day came to return to Alta. Katie packed her bags with shaking hands, including her finest dress because she suspected Luke might propose, and she wanted to look beautiful for him. The journey to Alta felt different this time. Katie was not just visiting for a fair but potentially looking at her future home. She studied the landscape with new eyes, noting the roughness but also the beauty. The mountains were dusted with early snow, and the aspens had turned gold, painting the hillsides in brilliant color. Uncle Harold had arranged to rent a small shop space in Alta for a week-long sale, rather than just setting up at another fair. This would allow Katie to get a feel for the town as a potential permanent location. The shop was on Main Street, between the general store and a saddle maker, and though small, it had good light and a solid lock. They had barely finished unloading their inventory when Luke appeared. Katie saw him through the window and dropped the jewelry case she was carrying, not caring that her uncle would scold her for carelessness. She ran to the door, and then she was in Luke's arms, breathing in the scent of leather and sage and him. "Katie," he murmured against her hair. "God, I missed you. The letters were not enough. I know, I missed you too, so much." She pulled back to look at him and laughed with joy. He looked good, healthy, and happy, his gray eyes bright with excitement. "I have so much to tell you," he said. "The land purchase went through. I own it, Katie, 20 acres with my name on the deed." "That is wonderful." She wanted to tell him about her uncle's gift, about her own plans, but Uncle Harold cleared his throat meaningfully from inside the shop. "Mr. Kane, good to see you again." Luke reluctantly released Katie and stepped inside, offering his hand to Harold. "Mr. Jacobson, thank you for your generosity, sir. Your gift made all the difference." "Katie told you about that, did she?" Harold smiled. "Well, consider it an investment in my niece's happiness." "Now, I assume you two want to talk privately. Katie, why don't you show Mr. Kane the shop space we are considering for a permanent location?" Katie shot her uncle a grateful look. There was another, smaller space 2 doors down that the landlord had mentioned was available for lease. It would be perfect for a jewelry workshop if she decided to establish herself in Alta. She and Luke walked to the empty shop, and as soon as they were inside with the door closed, he pulled her close again. "I have been dreaming of this moment for 3 months," Luke said softly. "Every night I imagine holding you again." "Show me your land," Katie said impulsively. "I want to see it, see what you have been working toward." Luke's face lit up. "Now, why not? Uncle Harold can manage the shop for an hour or two." They borrowed a horse and buggy from the livery, and Luke drove them out of town toward the mountains. The autumn afternoon was crisp and clear, and Katy felt like her heart might burst from happiness. The land was everything Luke had described and more. The creek sparkled in the sunlight, and the meadow grass was golden with fall. Mountains rose on three sides, offering protection from the worst weather, and Katy could easily picture a small house nestled among the cottonwood trees near the water. "This is beautiful," she breathed. "Luke, you chose so well. You really like it," he sounded almost nervous. "I know it is not much now, just raw land, but I see potential here. I see our future." Katy turned to face him, taking both his hands in hers. "I see it too. I see a home, a family, a life we will build together." Luke took a deep breath, and Katy realized he was trembling slightly. "Katy, I know we have only known each other a short time. I know some people would say we are rushing things, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life than I am of this." He dropped to one knee, still holding her hands. "Katherine Jane Jacobson, will you marry me? Will you take a chance on a cowboy with more dreams than money and help me build a life on this land?" Tears streamed down Katy's face, but she was smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. "Yes. Yes, Luke, I will marry you. There is nothing I want more." He stood and swept her into his arms, spinning her around as she laughed and cried at the same time. When he finally set her down, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. "I will spend the rest of my life making you happy," Luke vowed. "I will work harder than I have ever worked. I will build you a home, give you a good life." "We will build it together," Katy corrected. "Luke, I have plans too. I want to open a jewelry shop here in Alta. I have saved money and I have my uncle's blessing. We will both be working toward our dreams." Luke looked stunned. "You would do that? Leave Salt Lake City and your uncle's established business to start over here?" "I would do it for you," Katy said simply, "but also for myself. I want this life, Luke. I want the challenge of building something new. I want to work side by side with the man I love and create a future that belongs to both of us." "What did I do to deserve you?" Luke's voice was rough with emotion. "Katy, you are more precious than any gem. You are my diamond, my ruby, the treasure I never expected to find. And you are my home," Katy said softly, "the place I have been searching for without even knowing it." They stood there in the meadow, holding each other as the sun began its descent toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of fire. Around them, the land waited, patient and full of promise. When they returned to town, Uncle Harold took one look at their joined hands and radiant faces and smiled. "I assume congratulations are in order. We are getting married, Uncle." Katy could not contain her excitement. "This spring, as soon as Luke has a house built." "Spring?" Harold raised an eyebrow. "That is ambitious. Building a house over winter in these mountains will not be easy." "I have help lined up," Luke assured him. "Some of the hands from the Triple Bar have agreed to help during their off hours, and there is a good carpenter in town who owes me a favor. It will be small and simple at first, but it will be solid." "And what about your work at the ranch?" Harold asked. "You are still assistant foreman, are you not?" "I gave notice this morning," Luke said. "Mr. Patterson understood. He said any man who has a chance at his own land should take it. I will work through the end of the year, help them through the winter feeding, and then I will focus full-time on establishing my own operation." Katy saw the determination in Luke's eyes and felt a surge of pride. He was really doing this, taking the leap into an uncertain future because he believed in their dream. Over the next week, as Uncle Harold ran his jewelry sale, Katy and Luke made plans. They walked the town, discussing where Katy's shop should be located, what kind of customers she might attract, and how to build a reputation in a new place. Luke introduced her to people he knew in Alta, ranchers and shopkeepers and miners, building connections that would serve them both well. Katie also set up the turquoise stone Luke had given her. She designed a simple pendant setting that showcased the stone's natural beauty, and her uncle helped her create it. When it was finished, Katie wore it constantly, a visible symbol of Luke's love. The night before Katie had to return to Salt Lake City, Luke took her to dinner at the best restaurant in Alta, which, while not fancy by city standards, made an effort with tablecloths and candles. Over roast chicken and potatoes, they discussed timelines. "I will need at least 3 months in Salt Lake City to wrap things up," Katie said. "I need to train someone to help Uncle Harold finish current commissions and organize my equipment for transport. Can you have the house livable by March?" "I will have it done by February if it kills me," Luke promised. "I want you here, Katie. I want to start our life together." "How long should we wait after I arrive to have the wedding?" Katie asked. "Is a month enough time to plan something simple?" Luke reached across the table and took her hand. "Katie, I would marry you tomorrow if I could, but I want to do this right. I want you to have a proper wedding, something you can look back on with happiness." "I do not need anything elaborate," Katie said honestly. "Just our closest friends and family. Maybe a small reception at the church hall. What I care about is starting our life together." "Then let us say April," Luke suggested. "That gives you time to settle in, for us to finish the house properly, and to plan a simple but nice wedding. Does that work?" "Perfect," Katie smiled. "April it is." The parting the next morning was bittersweet but easier than the first time. They had a plan now, a timeline, a future mapped out before them. Katie kissed Luke goodbye and boarded the train with her uncle, watching through the window as Alta disappeared into the distance. "No tears this time," Harold observed. "No tears," Katie confirmed. "Because I know I am coming back. This is not goodbye, just a brief separation." The next 3 months in Salt Lake City flew by in a flurry of activity. Katie trained a young woman named Sarah to assist Harold in the shop, teaching her the basics of gem identification and customer service. She completed several major commissions, including a complicated engagement ring that tested all her skills. And she packed, carefully wrapping her tools and equipment for transport to Alta. Luke's letters arrived weekly, full of updates on the house construction. He sent sketches of the floor plan, a simple 4-room structure with space for expansion. He described choosing logs from the nearby forest, how his friends from the ranch helped raise the walls, and the satisfaction of seeing their home taking shape. In February, Luke's letter contained exciting news. The house was finished, basic but solid, with a good stove for heat and cooking, sturdy furniture built by the local carpenter, and windows that looked out over the meadow and mountains. He was ready for Katie to come home. Katie made arrangements to travel to Alta in early March, giving her time to settle in before the wedding. Uncle Harold had agreed to come for the ceremony, and to bring Sarah along so she could see how Katie planned to set up her Alta shop. It felt surreal to be making these final preparations, closing one chapter of her life and beginning another. The night before she left Salt Lake City, Harold gave her a gift. It was a custom jewelry case, beautifully crafted with her initials, KJ, on the lid. "For your new shop," he said gruffly. "Every jeweler needs a proper display case, and Katie, I want you to have this too." He handed her a leather portfolio containing documents, partnership papers. "You are not my apprentice anymore. You are my business partner, equal share in the Salt Lake City shop and full ownership of the Alta location. We will be Jacobson Jewelers, 2 locations, 1 standard of excellence." Katie threw her arms around her uncle, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for everything. For taking me in, teaching me, believing in me." You earned every bit of it, my dear. Your mother would be so proud of the woman you have become. I know I am." Harold pulled back, wiping at his own eyes. "Now let us get you packed. You have a cowboy waiting, and I have never known you to be late for anything important." The journey to Alta felt like coming home. Katie watched the familiar landscape roll past and felt her excitement building. Luke had promised to meet her at the train station, and sure enough, when the train pulled in, he was there on the platform, looking nervous and excited. Their reunion was everything she had hoped for. Luke swept her into his arms, not caring who saw, and Katie laughed with pure joy. "Welcome home, Katie," he murmured. "Are you ready to see our house?" "I have been ready for months." Luke had borrowed a wagon, and they loaded Katie's trunks and cases of jewelry equipment. The drive to the property took about 20 minutes, and with each mile, Katie felt her anticipation growing. Then there it was, their house, sitting in the meadow exactly as Luke had described. It was small, yes, and rough around the edges, but it was solid and real and theirs. Smoke rose from the chimney and curtains hung in the windows. "You hung curtains?" Katie asked, delighted. Luke blushed slightly. "Mrs. Patterson from the ranch helped. She said no house was complete without curtains. She also stocked the kitchen with basics and made sure everything was clean. She is looking forward to meeting you properly." Inside, the house smelled of fresh wood and coffee. The main room served as kitchen and living area, with a cast-iron stove, a table and chairs, and a comfortable-looking sofa near the fireplace. 2 bedrooms led off the main room, and Luke had set up one as a temporary workshop for Katie. "It is not much yet," Luke said anxiously, "but we can add on as we need to. Maybe a proper workshop building in the future and more bedrooms when children come." Katie turned to him, her eyes shining. "It is perfect. Luke, you built this for us. You made our dream real." "We are making it real together," Luke corrected. He pulled her close. "Katie, I have been sleeping at the ranch bunkhouse until you arrived. I wanted to respect propriety, but the wedding is only 5 weeks away now. Can you manage out here alone until then, or would you rather stay in town?" Katie looked around their home, already imagining the life they would build here. "I will manage. Besides, I have work to do. I need to set up the shop in town, start building a customer base. 5 weeks will fly by." And they did. Katie threw herself into establishing her jewelry business, renting the small shop space near her uncle's temporary location, and setting it up for permanent operation. She placed advertisements in the local paper, introduced herself to the town's merchants, and began taking custom orders. Word spread quickly that Alta now had a skilled jeweler, and Katie found herself with more work than she had anticipated. Luke, meanwhile, was establishing his ranch operation. He bought a small herd of cattle, built corrals and a barn, and began the hard work of turning raw land into a productive ranch. He and Katie saw each other every day, either in town when she was at the shop, or at the property when she returned home in the evenings. They fell into a comfortable routine that felt like a preview of their married life. Luke would stop by the shop in town to check on Katie, often bringing her lunch. Katie would close the shop in late afternoon and drive out to the ranch, where she would cook dinner while Luke finished his evening chores. They would eat together, discussing their days, making plans for the future, simply enjoying being together. The night before their wedding, Katie stayed in town at the boarding house, tradition demanding that the bride and groom spend the final night apart. Her uncle had arrived from Salt Lake City with Sarah, and several of Luke's friends from the Triple Bar Ranch had come to celebrate. It was a small gathering, but full of genuine happiness and good wishes. April 15th, 1884, dawned clear and beautiful, with wildflowers blooming across the meadows and the mountains still snow-capped in the distance. Katie dressed in a simple but elegant white dress she had made herself, with lace at the collar and cuffs. She wore the turquoise pendant Luke had given her, set in gold by her uncle. Her hair was pinned up with a few loose curls framing her face, and she carried a bouquet of wildflowers picked that morning. The wedding took place at Alta's small church, with Uncle Harold walking Katie down the aisle. Luke stood at the altar in his best suit, looking handsome and nervous and completely besotted. When their eyes met, Katie felt her heart overflow with love. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. They spoke traditional vows, but Luke had added his own words at the end. "Katie, you are more precious to me than any gem, more valuable than any treasure. I promise to love you, honor you, and work beside you all the days of my life." Katie responded with tears in her eyes. "Luke, you are my home, my partner, my great adventure. I promise to build our life together with love, patience, and joy." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Luke kissed Katie with such tenderness that several people in the congregation wiped away tears. The reception at the church hall was lively and fun. Mrs. Patterson had organized the ranchers' wives to provide food, and there was music and dancing late into the afternoon. Katie danced with her new husband, with her uncle, with various ranchers and townspeople who had already become friends. She felt embraced by this community in a way she had never expected. As the sun began to set, Luke whispered to Katie, "Ready to go home, Mrs. Kane?" "More than ready, Mr. Kane." They said their goodbyes, accepted final congratulations, and drove out to their ranch in the spring twilight. The house awaited them, warm and welcoming, the curtains glowing with lamplight that Luke had arranged to have lit earlier. Inside, Luke had set the table with wildflowers and the good dishes Mrs. Patterson had given them as a wedding present. He had prepared a simple meal, and they ate by candlelight, giddy with happiness and the knowledge that this was just the first of thousands of meals they would share. Later, as they sat together on the porch watching stars emerge in the darkening sky, Katie rested her head on Luke's shoulder and sighed with contentment. "What are you thinking?" Luke asked softly. "That I am exactly where I am supposed to be. That everything I have been through, all the loss and grief and uncertainty, led me here to you." Katie lifted her head to look at him. "I am thinking that I am the luckiest woman in the world." Luke kissed her forehead. "I am the lucky one. A year ago, I was just a drifting cowboy with no real purpose. Now I have a wife, a home, a future. You gave me all that, Katie." "We gave it to each other," Katie corrected. "We built this together." "So we did, and we will keep building day by day for the rest of our lives." The first year of their marriage was hard work, but deeply satisfying. Luke built up his herd slowly, learning the challenges of managing cattle on mountain rangeland. He faced harsh weather, predators, and the constant demands of ranching, but he met each challenge with determination and growing skill. Katie's jewelry business flourished beyond her expectations. She developed a reputation for quality work and fair prices, and customers came from surrounding towns to commission pieces. She specialized in settings that incorporated the local turquoise and other semi-precious stones found in the area, creating a distinctive style that became sought after. They worked long hours, both of them driven by the need to establish themselves, but they always made time for each other. Sunday became their sacred day, when they would pack a picnic and explore their land or ride into the mountains, reconnecting with each other and remembering why they had chosen this life. In their second year of marriage, Katie discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and a little fear. Bringing a child into their still precarious situation felt risky, but it also felt right, like the natural next step in building their life together. Katie worked at the shop until she was 8 months along, then reluctantly turned the day-to-day operations over to a young woman she had trained. Luke, meanwhile, prepared for fatherhood by adding a room onto the house and building a beautiful wooden cradle during the long winter evenings. Their son was born in February of 1886, during a snowstorm that made it impossible for the doctor to reach them from town. Luke delivered his own son with the help of Mrs. Patterson, who had experienced midwife skills. When he placed the squalling infant in Katie's arms, both of them were crying with relief and wonder. They named him James Harold Kane, after Luke's father and Katie's uncle. Jamie, as they called him, was a healthy, happy baby with his mother's green eyes and his father's determination. Parenthood transformed them both. Luke became even more focused on building the ranch, knowing he was now providing for a family. Katie discovered depths of love she had not known existed, marveling at the tiny, perfect human they had created together. Uncle Harold visited several times a year, delighting in his great-nephew and always bringing extravagant gifts. He and Luke had developed a warm relationship, bonding over their shared love for Katie and their mutual respect for hard work. As Jamie grew from infant to toddler, the ranch and jewelry business both continued to thrive. Luke acquired more land, increasing their holdings to 40 acres. Katie expanded her shop, adding a small gallery space where she displayed not just jewelry, but also work from other local artisans. In 1888, their daughter was born, a tiny dark-haired beauty they named Margaret Ann, after Katie's mother and Luke's mother. Maggie was different from Jamie, quieter and more observant, but equally beloved. The house expanded again to accommodate the growing family. Luke built on 2 more bedrooms and a proper workshop for Katie separate from the main house. The ranch now employed 2 regular hands, young men learning the trade much as Luke had years before. Katie looked back sometimes at the girl she had been at the Alta fair in 1883, and she could hardly recognize herself. That Katie had been uncertain, still finding her way, not quite sure where she belonged. This Katie, the woman she had become, knew exactly who she was. She was Luke's wife, Jamie and Maggie's mother, a skilled jeweler and a rancher's partner. She belonged to this land, this community, this life she and Luke had built together. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Luke gave Katie a gift. It was a ring he had designed himself, set with the largest, most perfect turquoise Katie had ever seen. "You remember," he said as he slipped it on her finger, "that piece of turquoise I gave you when we first met? I found this stone on our land last summer. I wanted to give you something from the home we have built together." Katie's eyes filled with tears as she examined the exquisite ring. The stone was a brilliant blue with delicate matrix, set in a gold band etched with a design of mountain peaks. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "Luke, you made this yourself," I have been learning from my wife. "Turns out working with metal is not so different from working with wood and leather. Just requires different tools and more patience," he smiled. "Though I will never have your skill, this is rough work compared to what you create." "It is perfect because you made it for me," Katie kissed him. "You are still more precious than any gem, Luke Kane. After 5 years, 2 children, and countless days of hard work, you are still the treasure of my life." "And you are mine," Luke said softly. "Every day with you is a gift I never expected to receive." Their children grew, and the ranch prospered. Jamie showed early signs of inheriting his father's love for ranching, trailing after Luke whenever allowed and talking endlessly about horses and cattle. Maggie, quieter but equally determined, spent hours in Katie's workshop, learning to work with wire and beads, showing an artist's eye for color and design. In 1890, when Jamie was 4 and Maggie 2, Katie discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder than the previous two, and Katie had to reduce her work at the shop significantly. Luke worried constantly, remembering the difficulty of Jamie's birth and fearing for Katie's health. But in May of 1891, their third child arrived safely, another boy they named Thomas Edward. Tommy was a robust, loud baby who seemed determined to make his presence known from the moment of his birth. With 3 children, the Kane household was lively and sometimes chaotic. Katie juggled motherhood and her jewelry work, while Luke managed the expanding ranch operations. They had less time for quiet evenings together, but they found joy in family dinners, in watching their children play, in the everyday moments that comprised their life together. Uncle Harold, now in his 70s, visited less frequently due to his health, but he maintained his close relationship with Katie through letters. He had turned over most of the Salt Lake City operations to Sarah, who had proven herself an excellent jeweler and businesswoman. Harold's letters were full of pride in Katie's accomplishments and delight in stories about his great-niece and great-nephews. In 1893, Harold made one final trip to Alta. Katie knew immediately upon seeing him that this visit was different. He looked frailer, older, and there was a sense of finality to the way he embraced her. They spent a wonderful week together, Harold playing with the children, inspecting Katie's latest jewelry designs, and talking with Luke about ranching and business. On his last evening, he called Katie to the porch where they could talk privately. "My dear girl," he said, taking her hand, "I want you to know how proud I am of you. You took the skills I taught you and built something wonderful. But more than that, you built a life full of love and purpose. That is the true measure of success." "Uncle, you sound like you are saying goodbye." Katie's voice trembled. "I am getting old, Katie. I may not have many more visits left in me, but I am at peace. I have lived a good life and I have seen you settled and happy. That is enough." He squeezed her hand. "You gave meaning to my later years, you know. After your aunt died, I thought I would just work until I could not work anymore and then fade away. But raising you, teaching you, seeing you flourish, that gave me purpose again." Katie was crying now, laying her head on her uncle's shoulder as she had done so many times over the years. "I love you, Uncle Harold. You saved me when I lost my parents. You gave me a future when I thought everything was over. And you gave me joy when I thought mine was finished. We saved each other, my dear." Harold died peacefully in his sleep 6 months later in his own bed in Salt Lake City. Katie made the journey for his funeral, leaving the children with Luke and Mrs. Patterson. She mourned deeply, but there was comfort in knowing Harold had lived to see her happy and had died peacefully, without suffering. He left her the Salt Lake City shop, though Sarah continued to manage it as per Harold's instructions. Katie now owned 2 successful jewelry businesses, a legacy of skill and artistry that she would eventually pass on to Maggie, who showed increasing talent and interest in the craft. Life continued its rhythm of seasons and years. The children grew, the ranch prospered, and Katie's jewelry business became known throughout the territory. When Utah achieved statehood in 1896, the Kanes celebrated with their community, proud to be part of this new chapter in the region's history. Jamie, at 10, was already working alongside his father on the ranch, learning everything Luke could teach him. Maggie, at 8, divided her time between helping her mother in the jewelry workshop and exploring the mountains, always returning with pockets full of interesting stones. Tommy, at 5, was still too young for serious work, but followed his siblings everywhere, determined not to be left out. In 1897, Katie and Luke celebrated their 13th wedding anniversary by taking a rare trip alone together, leaving the children with the Pattersons. They rode up into the mountains to a place where the aspens grew thick and a waterfall cascaded down the rocks. "You ever regret it?" Luke asked as they sat by the water. "Leaving Salt Lake City, choosing this life instead of the easier path?" Katie looked at her husband, at the silver just beginning to show in his dark hair, at the lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun and from laughter. She thought about their children, their home, the life they had built together through hard work and love and unwavering commitment. "Never," she said firmly. "Not for a single moment. This is exactly where I am supposed to be." Luke pulled her close, kissing her with the same tenderness he had shown at their wedding 13 years before. "You are still the most precious thing in my life, Katie Kane, more precious than any gem." "And you are still my home," Katie replied. "My great adventure, my partner in all things." They sat together in the mountain sunshine, comfortable in the silence of deep understanding. They had weathered hard times and celebrated good ones. They had built a ranch, raised children, created businesses, and established themselves in their community. But more than any of those achievements, they had built a marriage based on respect, love, and genuine partnership. As the years continued to pass, the Kane Ranch became one of the most successful operations in the region. Luke's reputation for quality cattle and fair dealing brought buyers from across the state. Katie's jewelry, now crafted with Maggie's increasingly skilled assistance, was sought after throughout Utah and neighboring territories. Jamie grew into a fine young man, serious and hardworking, inheriting his father's natural skill with horses and cattle. At 18, he began courting a rancher's daughter from the neighboring property, a sensible girl named Elizabeth who Luke and Katie both approved of. Maggie, at 16, had become an exceptional jewelry designer, creating pieces that even surpassed Katie's work in their innovation and artistry. She showed no interest yet in courting, preferring to focus on mastering her craft. Katie saw herself in her daughter's dedication and gave Maggie the space to develop her skills. Tommy, the youngest, surprised everyone by showing an interest in neither ranching nor jewelry, but in books and learning. Luke and Katie made arrangements for him to attend school in Salt Lake City when he turned 15, staying with Sarah and her husband who had taken over Uncle Harold's house, along with the shop. In 1900, as the new century dawned, Luke and Katie stood on their porch watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. They were in their early 40s now, no longer young but not yet old, settled into the prime of their lives. 17 years, Luke mused. Sometimes it feels like just yesterday I was helping a beautiful woman gather scattered gems at a fair. Other times it feels like I have known you my whole life. Both things are true, Katie said, leaning against him. Time is strange that way. But Luke, if I could go back to that girl I was at the fair, I would tell her not to be afraid. I would tell her to trust her heart, because it was leading her exactly where she needed to go. Would you do it all again, exactly the same way? Katie thought about it, about the challenges they had faced, the moments of fear and uncertainty, the times when money was tight and the future seemed precarious. But she also thought about the joy, the love, the deep satisfaction of building something meaningful together. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Every moment, every choice, every challenge, because all of it led us here, and here is exactly where I want to be." Luke turned her to face him, his gray eyes still as clear and kind as they had been 17 years before. "You know what I realized the other day? I never did buy you an engagement ring. I just proposed with nothing but words and hope." Katie laughed. "I am a jeweler, Luke. I could have made myself 1,000 engagement rings. But you did not. You wear the wedding band I gave you and the turquoise ring from our 5th anniversary, but you never made yourself an engagement ring. Because I did not need one. You gave me something more valuable than any ring. You gave me your heart, your commitment, your partnership. Those things are worth more than all the gems in the world. You are remarkable, Katherine Jane. Luke kissed her softly. And I am the luckiest man alive. Their children married and started families of their own. Jamie and Elizabeth settled on a portion of the Kane land, building their own home and working the ranch alongside Luke. They gave Luke and Katie 3 grandchildren, healthy, rowdy children who delighted in visiting their grandparents. Maggie eventually married a gentle man who worked as a lawyer in Alta, someone who appreciated her artistry and supported her continuing work in jewelry design. They had 2 daughters who inherited their mother's artistic talent. Tommy, after completing his education, returned to Alta and opened a bookstore, the town's first. He married a schoolteacher, and together they worked to improve education opportunities in the region. As Luke and Katie entered their 50s, they gradually began stepping back from the day-to-day operations of ranch and shop. Jamie took over more of the ranching decisions, while Maggie managed the jewelry businesses in both Alta and Salt Lake City. Luke and Katie remained involved, offering advice and helping when needed, but they also finally had time to simply enjoy each other's company. They traveled a bit, visiting places they had always wanted to see. They spent long afternoons reading together, working on small projects and watching their grandchildren grow. They had earned this peaceful time and they savored it. On their 30th anniversary in 1914, their children organized a celebration that brought together the entire community. The church hall was decorated with flowers and bunting, and people came from across the state to honor the couple who had become pillars of the Alta community. Speech after speech praised Luke's integrity as a rancher and businessman, Katie's artistry and generosity, and the way they had both contributed to making Alta a better place. But the most touching moment came when Maggie stood to speak about her parents. "I have watched my parents build a life together for 30 years, she said, her voice steady and clear. They started with nothing but love and determination. They worked harder than anyone I have ever known. But more than their success in business, I have learned from their success in marriage. They have shown me that true partnership means supporting each other's dreams, working through difficulties together, and never forgetting why you chose each other in the first place." She turned to face her parents directly. "Papa, you always told me that Mama is more precious than any gem. And Mama, you always said that Papa is your home. Watching you live those truths every day has taught me more than any words could. Thank you for showing me what love looks like." Katie was crying openly, and Luke's eyes were suspiciously bright. Their children, grandchildren, and friends surrounded them with love and celebration, and Katie felt overwhelmed with gratitude for this life she had been blessed to live. As the party wound down and they returned to their home, now expanded and comfortable, but still the same house Luke had built with his own hands, Katie and Luke sat together on the porch as they had done countless times over the years. 30 years, Katie marveled. "Luke, we have lived a whole life together. We have raised children, built businesses, weathered storms, and celebrated triumphs, and I love you more now than I did that day at the fair." "That seems impossible," Luke teased gently. "You barely knew me then. I knew enough. I knew you were kind and honest, and that my heart recognized something true in you." Katie took his hand, studying the calluses and scars that told the story of his life's work. "And every year since has proven that first instinct right. You saved me, Katie. Before I met you, I was just drifting, existing but not really living. You gave me purpose, a reason to put down roots and build something lasting." "We saved each other," Katie corrected, echoing words her uncle had once spoken to her. "I needed you as much as you needed me." We built this life together as partners, as equals. Luke stood and pulled Katie to her feet, gathering her into his arms. They swayed together gently, dancing to music only they could hear in the starlight on their porch. "Here is to the next 30 years, Luke murmured. Katie laughed softly. "We will be in our 80s, old and creaky. Then we will be old and creaky together. I cannot imagine anything better." The years continued their steady march. Luke and Katie grew older gracefully, remaining active in their community even as they handed over more responsibilities to their children. They took joy in their growing number of grandchildren, passing on stories and wisdom and love. Katie continued to work with jewelry on a small scale, creating special pieces for family and close friends. Luke stayed involved with the ranch, offering advice and enjoying the work without the pressure of full responsibility. They had achieved something rare, a true partnership that lasted across decades, through good times and hard ones, never wavering in its foundation of love and respect. In 1925, they celebrated their 41st anniversary quietly at home, surrounded by children and grandchildren. Katie was 64 now, her hair silver but her eyes still bright. Luke at 66 moved a bit slower but retained the strength that had defined him all his life. As Katie looked around the table at dinner that evening, seeing 3 generations of the family she and Luke had created, she felt a profound sense of completion. This was the life that had begun with a dropped jewel box and a kind cowboy helping a flustered woman. From that brief encounter had flowed all of this: children, grandchildren, businesses, community ties, and a love that had only deepened with time. "What are you thinking?" Luke asked quietly, noticing her reflective expression. "That if I could go back to that fair in 1883 and tell that young woman what her life would become, she would never believe me. All this from such a simple beginning." "There was nothing simple about it," Luke disagreed gently. "It took courage for you to trust your heart. It took work from both of us to build what we have. None of this was inevitable or easy." "You are right," Katie acknowledged, "but it was worth every challenge, every sacrifice, every moment of uncertainty. Would you do it again?" It was a question he had asked before over the years, and Katie's answer never changed. In a heartbeat, without hesitation, every single time. Luke squeezed her hand under the table and Katie squeezed back, a wordless affirmation of all they had shared and all they continued to be to each other. As the evening wound down and their family departed to their own homes, Luke and Katie prepared for bed in the comfortable routine of decades together. They moved around each other with the ease of long practice, each knowing the other's habits and preferences as well as their own. Settled into bed, Katie curled against Luke's side, her head on his shoulder. "Luke, thank you for approaching me that day at the fair. Thank you for helping me, for asking to see me again, for taking a chance on a jeweler's niece who probably seemed completely impractical for a cowboy." Luke's arms tightened around her. "Thank you for seeing past the dusty cowboy to the man underneath. Thank you for taking a chance on me, for believing in our dreams, for building this incredible life with me." "You are still more precious than any gem," Katie whispered, echoing the words that had become their private vow to each other. "And you are still my home," Luke replied. "My heart, my partner, my great love." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms in the house they had built, on the land they had made into a home, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived and a love that had endured. The years that followed brought the inevitable losses that come with age. Friends passed away, and eventually, Luke's health began to decline. But through it all, Katie remained by his side, as devoted at 70 as she had been at 22. Luke, for his part, continued to wake up each morning grateful for another day with the woman who had transformed his life. In 1931, at the age of 72, Luke passed away peacefully in his sleep, Katie holding his hand. His last words to her were the same he had spoken countless times over their 47 years of marriage. "You are more precious than any gem." Katie mourned deeply, but she took comfort in their children, grandchildren, and the legacy they had built together. She continued to live in the house Luke had built, tending a small garden and doing simple jewelry work, always wearing the turquoise ring and pendant that symbolized their love. She lived another 8 years, dying peacefully at the age of 80 in 1939, surrounded by 3 generations of the family she and Luke had created. Her last words, witnessed by Maggie, were addressed to a husband she would soon rejoin. "I am coming home." They were buried side by side on a gentle hill, overlooking the ranch they had built together, their graves marked with simple stones. But their true legacy was not in stone or land or jewelry, but in the family they had raised, the community they had helped build, and the example they had set of what love and partnership could accomplish. The Kane Ranch continued to thrive under Jamie's management, and eventually his children's. Katie's jewelry businesses remained successful, with Maggie's daughters carrying on the tradition of artistry and quality. The house Luke built stood for generations, expanded and modernized, but still fundamentally the home he had created for his bride. And in Alta, Utah, people still told the story of the jeweler's niece and the cowboy who met at a fair in 1883, fell in love in 3 days, and built a life that lasted nearly half a century. It became a local legend, a reminder that sometimes the most precious things in life cannot be bought or created. They can only be found and cherished when 2 hearts recognize each other and choose to build a future together. Their story was one of love, yes, but also of courage, hard work, partnership, and unwavering commitment. It was a story of 2 people who saw in each other not just who they were, but who they could become together. And it was a story that proved, in the end, that the most valuable treasure anyone can find is not gold or jewels or land, but another soul with whom to share the journey.